Hi, everybody. I know it's like no notice, so I'm so sorry about that. Let me see if we have anybody here. Okay, we have Misfit. Hi, Misfit. Hi, Shay. Hi, NorCal Jim. Princess Malga Elsa. Hello, Jay. Hello. Big Chap. Hello. Riddler. Hello, hello. Do I have everybody? I think maybe. I know someone. Oh, K-Braze. Hi. Skittles. Laura, hello. And I think I still hear that music. Hold on. I think it's on very quietly, the background music. Yep, it's on a loop. I don't know if you guys were able to hear it, but yeah, it was still playing. So Laura, yes, I think you said you had to go to sleep. So I'm sorry. I know this is so late. Oh, Misfit, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate it. That's really kind of you. So does anybody know about this case? It's right now it's currently going on. I'm surprised like I haven't really seen much coverage of it. It's a Wisconsin man, Zachariah Anderson, and he faces trials for charges in connection with the disappearance and death of Rosalia Gutierrez Jr. in May of 2020. And he's charged with first-degree intentional homicide, hiding a corpse, and stalking. And prosecutors allege that he stalked his ex-girlfriend and killed the new love interest. And he's at the Kenosha apartment he lived in. And he's back on trial after the judge declared a mistrial last year after only 2 days of testimony. And Gutierrez's body has never been found. And so if you've heard of this, can you put a 1? And if you haven't heard of it, can you put a 2? If you know a little bit, can you put a 3? And hi, Dave. Good to see you. Hi, Edward. Good to see you. Okay, K-Bray said haven't seen anything about it. And okay, so I wanted to say I know I said I was gonna do 3 other cases. I still am gonna do that. The Courtney, Shayna, and also Melissa. I was saying Natalie to Shay earlier, but it's Melissa. Yes, I still am gonna cover those. So I'm gonna do like this obsession series thing. I'm thinking like when obsession turns deadly, and so this is gonna be one of the first ones in it. So I want to see. I'll play some of it and see if you guys are interested in this case that's going on. I found it to be super interesting. I'll tell you guys why a little bit later, but I want to see what if you guys think it seems like an interesting case. So I'll play like what the prosecution said in their opening and what the defense said in theirs. And I think they actually both presented very strong defenses on both sides. I thought their arguments were both very strong. Okay, let me see. I see a lot of 2s, 3 Misfit, 1 Riddler, 2 Big Chap, 3 Shea Benet, 2 Struggles Real. Yes, Princess, this is, well, the case, it happened in 2020, but currently, the court case is going on now. So they're at day 13, I believe, in the court case. It's going on every day, and it's a really interesting trial to me. So I'll actually start playing it, and I want to see what you guys think while watching it. Because I'm not going to give my opinion yet on what I thought when I watched the prosecution, but I'll just say they both had strong arguments. So I want to know what you think first when you hear the prosecution, and then I want to hear what you think after you hear the defense. So let me get that ready. So just one moment. And can you put a 1 if you can see my screen, and then also Joe will actually just put a 1 if you can see and hear it.
Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you first of all for all your service. Can everybody hear me very well so far? This will be several days. There'll be a lot of difficult and some emotional testimony, and I just wanted to thank you in advance for the time and effort and attention you're going to put in this case. This case has a lot of moving parts, and so Though the judge has asked that it be brief in his discussion with you, I fear that I need to cover a number of things with you, so I'm going to take the time that I believe that the evidence demands to try to give you a roadmap as to what I believe you will hear in terms of evidence in this case. I start with what I understand Sadie Beecham will share with you. Sadie Beecham, I think, will tell you that on May 17th, 2020, she felt her life was finally about to change. She had lived with the defendant last in 2012. So this was 8 years later since she had last lived with him on a regular basis. They had 3 children together. She will tell you that he basically came and went as he pleased. He had a different household. He did not pay her living expenses or her children's on any kind of regular basis. Sometimes he showed up on weekends, and yet he expected and anticipated that they were in a relationship and that simply was going to be enough. In December of 2018, she didn't want to live that way anymore. And so for a variety of reasons, they broke up. And so that relationship, that separate houses, you come when you want, when you mess up, you just beg me for forgiveness or do a gesture that tries to get the same situation where you're always in control, was going to be over. And so for a few weeks, they didn't have any contact. And then slowly but surely, the defendant wanted to have visits with his kids, which of course was fine with her. And he was able to get back in touch with her on a regular basis, trying to get back together with her. Again, trying the cycle of trying to get forgiveness and everything will change. But this time she wasn't going there. It doesn't mean she wasn't nice to him. Doesn't mean there weren't times where she tried out of kindness to explain why this relationship was not happening. Doesn't mean she, didn't have feelings for him in some way, shape, or form based on their history. But she was ready to move on. And by February 17th of 2020, she was on a dating site, and she met somebody where she thought maybe this will go somewhere. The person she was in contact with was Rosalio Gutierrez. Now, he was from Kenosha, so there was that was a drive to sort of see what she was going to be able to make of this. But he seemed to love his kids and to have a relationship with his kids, and she liked that it might go somewhere. Now, this is the early weeks of this maybe relationship, right? It's not exclusive. And so she doesn't feel like she wants to share that yet with her 11-year-old who turns 12. And she certainly doesn't want to share it with the defendant, who is her ex. She knows him, and she is right in the sense that what I'm going to talk about next in the evidence, I'm going to ask you to look for a certain pattern. I'm going to ask you to consider whether the defendant, as I outline the next grouping of incidents, is an individual who shows by each of these incidents that he is overwhelmed with jealousy. You'll hear a number of communications where that is clear even from his own mouth, and that he has an overwhelming need in that jealousy to be in absolute control when it comes to safety. Each of these incidences can be characterized as a gesture where he demands control, and as he loses control, we'll talk about what the evidence shows comes next. More and more irrational each time, more and more disturbing. And then I'm going to ask you to take a look at whether the defendant in each of these incidences shows you his determination to have absolute control by using every tool available. Using human spies, a person named Steve Lentz, he texts as a lookout for him. His own daughter, age 11 and 12, will tell you I was recruited by him as essentially a spy. And that he's willing to use electronics too, basically every way.
So that's one thing. I didn't know if I was muted, how they said that his 11-year-old daughter they used as a spy. And that's one thing they talk about, where she supposedly put a tracker in the car of the mom's car And so that's one thing that, and it does get more interesting. This is just like the beginning of his statement. So I'm trying to think if I should put it on 2 times, or not 2 times, like 1.5, till it gets a little more interesting. But yeah, I'm probably gonna do that, but I promise it does soon.
You can spy on another individual the defendant was employing in regards to Sadie Beecham. So let's talk about each of those incidences briefly. April 24th, and this is just a 1-month period where the defendant slowly but surely learns no matter how he imposes himself, he will not get control. And so what culminates at the end of that about a month-long period is Rosalio.
Moment, I'm having trouble. I'm so sorry, I'm having tech issues. One moment.
Rang the doorbell, needing to show in a gesture, I'm still in control. You'll hear that in the defendant's phone when law enforcement apprehend him. In his phone, they find a screenshot that has a section of the registration of Rosalio Gutierrez on it. It has the signature section for the person who is Rosalio Gutierrez's stepfather. And in handwriting, which the daughter will tell you is my father's handwriting, it has Rosalio Gutierrez's home Kenosha address written down. Now, the event I've told you about on April 24th occurs at Sadie's home. The defendant, of course, knows Sadie's home, right? He's been there in the context of the children, etc. This is new. This is information about Rosalio Gutierrez's home. You'll hear Sadie Beecham indicate that also during this time period in April, she finds Olivia to have a phone she didn't know that she had. She looks in the phone. She discovers and knows that it's the defendant, one of the multiple phones the defendant utilizes. And you'll hear both Sadie and Olivia describe multiple phones. The defendant has a phone that he uses primarily, but he has a couple of other phones, one in particular used to record. She's looking at one of those phones, and she sees the defendant has ordered 2 tracking devices from Amazon. They are auto tracking devices you attach to a vehicle, and that are voice-activated recorders as well. So they have dual purpose for spying missions. Electronics to help you spy. So by now, Sadie has heard from her daughter that there was this invasion of her privacy on April 24th. She knows trackers have been purchased by the defendant. She knows through a number of texts how jealous and irrational he is regarding her beginnings of a new relationship. He is describing Rosalio Gutierrez as beaner, booger, using all sorts of abusive names and terminology for him. On May 8th, Sadie again does not have the children with her, and she is going to Rosalio's home. And based on the suspicions of what I've talked about that have occurred in the last couple of weeks, she thinks to herself at some point, you know what? He's probably tracking me. And so she searches her car, and she finds hidden under the car seat of one of the twins a phone that she knows belongs to the defendant, and it's on, meaning it would track her location. On May 8th, she drives to Kenosha. She turns that phone off. There's then a controversy between her and the defendant where he says, well, I just lost that phone. That phone must have toppled out of my pocket when I was working the car seat for one of the twins. Well, we know from looking into the electronics that he was using that phone and using an app he had just loaded on his phone recently, Find My Phone, to track her that very day. And so the things he told her about the circumstances were simply untrue. Instead, we know it was an app that he was using on that phone, connected to that phone, to figure out just where she would go on May 8th. Every time she brings this up, he acts like she's crazy. He acts like all the facts are false. But when you go into the electronics, when you go into his actual phone or computer, when you talk to Olivia, all the things she suspected and thought are actually true. The defendant is again and again fundamentally dishonest with her, acting as if these are all in her head or are accidents. Let's talk about the continuing escalation that this pattern that I've described shows. On May 13th, Sadie again does not have the children. Again, as a consulting adult, she decides to go down to visit Rosalio at his home address in Kenosha. Now, I want you to understand what we talked about. April 24th, May 8th, and now May 13th. Because we are talking about just weeks, just days before Rosalio Gutierrez at this same location is never again seen by those who love him, is essentially dead to those who love him. So now May 13th, we're 4 days away from that fateful day. On May 13th, Sadie goes down to Rosalio's. She is going down for food and to watch some movies. On the phone of the defendant, when taken into custody, on that phone, we have in the phone recordings of directions that look like GPS type directions, which direct you. They are deleted, but they are recovered. We don't have every one of them, but the pattern of them gets you to Rosalio's address. This is the defendant's phone that is traveling per those directions that were deleted to Rosalio's home on the same day.
Avery, okay, hold on. Let me pause it.
Now, Sadie is in Rosalio's home. And I want you to picture this.
Okay, Avery, so he is accused of killing his ex's new boyfriend and hiding the body. The prosecution says that he chopped the body up and disposed of it, and that the remains have never been found. The defense has, I'm going to play their argument too. Right now, they're just slowly getting into it, but they go strong in the next part when they go into the evidence or what they say is in the picture that they paint of him. But yeah, so he's on trial for the murder of his, him, even though they've never found his body. But this is what it is so far, just to give you an overview. So let me hit play.
That this is what the evidence will be. Sadie is having one of those conversations you have as you start your meal and you're sitting down to watch something on TV. Rosalio says something specific to her about, do you want to watch this or something else? Conversations that many of you have had hundreds of times in your life as you begin to start your meal. Suddenly, right after it comes from the lips of Rosalio Gutierrez, she receives a text on her phone. The text is from the defendant. And the text is an exact quote of what Rosalio just said to her. It's an exact quote that he's just texted her. Now, he tells her later, oh, that's an accident. I didn't mean to text you. That was just an accident. But his phone at that moment in time is going off a Kenosha tower, not a tower by his home in Mequon, a Kenosha tower, and it's the tower closest to where Rosalio Gutierrez lives. So not only do the directions get him there, and by the way, have him arriving at the right time, but his phone places him at that location, quoting what is being said inside Rosalio's apartment. I must be in control. Every gesture has the same pattern. I must be in control. By the next day, May 14th, we are now literally 3 days from Rosalio Gutierrez being dead to everyone who knows him. May 14th, the defendant now is looking for a confrontation based on his text messages to Sadie. May 14th, 4:13 p.m. You want me to stop by to meet Junior tonight? 4:41 p.m., half hour later. Still not off this topic. So you're saying I can stop by and meet someone later. Now, none of Sadie's communications are inviting him over. Let's make peace. Let's talk. Why don't you come on over? Why don't you two meet? This is the defendant attempting to provoke, but revealing his intentions. This is a communication suggesting I am looking for a confrontation. Here's what Olivia says about the period we've talked about so far. She says, every time I and the twins come over, this is the daughter, I apologize, this is the daughter, age 12. Every time we come over, he leaves and goes to follow mom. Every time we kids come over. She says to law enforcement, I am his spy about mom. I did it to please him. Here's a plan that she describes, age 12, to law enforcement that the defendant has cooked up and convinced her to be ready to implement. A spy operation. You ready? The 12-year-old says, on an occasion where I and the kids are brought to my dad's house because it's a visit, and where I know that my mom is going over to Rosalio's home, the plan is I will call my dad and that my dad will drive us kids back to mom's house, which of course would be unoccupied, right? Because Sadie would have gone to Rosalio's home. So my dad would drive us back to the unoccupied house. It's important I keep a key so that I can get in even though mom's not there. I and the twins will go into the house, and then I will call my dad and tell my dad, even though he's just dropped me off, hey, mom abandoned us and left us alone. This is the 12-year-old telling law enforcement that this is the plan that the defendant devised for her, his spy. And she said, at that point, my dad would report this. He would report that my mom had left us abandoned. That is the lengths that we're willing to go to get control, to end this relationship. They call it the plan. It's discussed multiple times. Now, on May 16th, 2020, one day before Rosalio Gutierrez is never again seen by those who love him, May 16th. Remember, I told you on May 17th how full of hope Sadie was. Well, here's why. On the 16th of May, Sadie gets a communication from Rosalio saying to her, would you like to come meet my kids? Rosalio has a boy, 11, and a girl, 8. They're at his house for the weekend on the 15th and 16th, and she's being invited for the first time to meet his kids. And they go for ice cream. And I think Sadie will tell you that this is a truly meaningful moment in her life, still today when she thinks about it. Those few hours she spent with those kids and Rosalio. She left for the night. She didn't spend the night. It was the last time she ever saw Rosalio Gutierrez. But it meant something to her because it's not an exclusive relationship, but it felt like her hopes that this relationship was going to build and get bigger and get better and maybe be the relationship for her. It felt like this really mattered. Here's how the defendant was handling that same bit.
I have no idea what is going on.
Yeah, you lay down with some Down syndrome Mexican version of your father. That's a text from the defendant to Sadie trying to impose himself in this real moment in her life. He's texting spy Stephen Lentz, who lives just close enough to Sadie that he can see if cars are in her driveway. So he's a good lookout, right? He's a good lookout post. This is the defendant to Stephen Lentz on May 16th. asking if she has a car in her driveway. Remember, she doesn't have the kids. So whether a car's in her driveway or not is frankly none of his business. But his spy is being employed at that moment. So on the 17th of May, that's the day after this big moment where Sadie met his kids. And Sadie has said throughout this case that it feels like the defendant is some way monitoring all her communications. Everything that she's communicating with Rosalio feels like the defendant seems to somehow know it in real time. And no one knows how that happened. That's how it is. So at 1:52 p.m., this is literally 8 hours before Rosalio Gutierrez is gone and dead to everyone who knows him. 1:52 p.m., Sadie texts Rosalio. Sadie says to him in the text, "I want to be yours and get more serious with our relationship." Okay, that's how she felt after she met his kids. That's her putting herself out there, right? Not an exclusive relationship, but here it is. So there's some text back and forth. Rosalio calls her at 8:30 p.m. that night. This is an hour and a half before he's never seen again. And she misses that call. His last text to her is at 8:36 p.m., his phone to her phone. She never hears from him again. She tries him on the 18th of May. This is a relationship where they are in communication in some way, shape, or form several times a day during this period of time. On the 18th, absolutely no communication from him. On the 19th in the morning, still absolutely no communication from him. And so finally, she jumps in her car and she drives from the Milwaukee area on that morning. What is going on? Trying to figure out what's happening.
K-Base.
She gets to his home in Kenosha.
Let me pause it.
And she finds that the sliding door is open. You'll see in the pictures, Rosalio Gutierrez has...
So it's funny, you asked, did the wife have anything to do with it? So the new girlfriend, the defense does try to bring her into some of this stuff to like put doubt about stuff, and they bring her name up a lot. But no, she didn't. I mean, I don't think she has anything to do with this, but I'm not going to give my opinions on what I think yet. But it's supposed to be just the ex-boyfriend that did the killing and hid the body. And that's where we're at now, supposedly, allegedly. But I definitely wanted to see what you guys think after hearing what the defense says.
Has that apartment in an apartment complex that's the bottom floor, and his slider and his screen face right onto the road. So the sliding door is open, the screen is closed, and she looks in, and boy, does she see a lot of blood. She calls 911. And at the moment she calls 911 and law enforcement gets there, there will be a number of things that law enforcement focus on in their investigation. And I'd ask you to think about these areas of focus as you think about the evidence as it comes in this case. One area of focus is, when was Rosalio Gutierrez last alive to those people who know him? The second area of investigation is, who has the motive and who has any pattern of conduct where they would be a person we should look to as a person who might have finished that pattern, completed that pattern, or acted on their motive and ended Rosalio Gutierrez's life. And then the third, of course, area of investigation was, where is the body of Rosalio Gutierrez? And I'm not going to belabor that in this opening. You'll hear about very substantial efforts in many jurisdictions involving many agencies to look for the body of Rosalio Gutierrez, which is never found. So on May 19th, okay, so this is 2 days after Rosalio has last been heard from, at 11:07 a.m., the Kenosha Police Department is at Rosalio's address. And they find through their investigation before too long that the last person in touch with him appears to be a woman whose last name is Macias, who received a text from him at 9:27 p.m. on the 17th, okay? And then she texted him back because she arrived at a building she thought was his. Turns out she was at the wrong building, but she thought she was at his building, and she calls him and texts him multiple times over the next half hour. Where are you? She'd never been here before. Are you coming out? You know, that kind of stuff. And there's never again an answer. So sometime after 9:27 p.m., The state's going to suggest to you all that blood results, and Rosalio Gutierrez is no more, to those who know him. They go through family and friends and
Deposit to show a clip and also read something, just because I know I went straight into the prosecution and some people might be not know exactly everything that's going on. So let me show an article, and also I'm going to show a clip also that Shay had sent me. So let me get the article. Let me see. Okay, so it is a jealous ex-boyfriend, bloody home. And let me know if you can see this. Can you put a 1 in chat? And let me open it on my phone so I can see what you guys are saying. Okay, thank you so much. I saw someone put 1. Yes, Misfit, thank you. A jealous ex-boyfriend, bloody home, and missing body. What we know about the Zachariah Anderson murder trial. And there it shows him. And by the way, this picture they said that he was mouthing to his daughter while she was on the stand, like telling her to zip it. That's what they are saying that he was doing in court. But anyways, moving along. So Wisconsin father is currently on trial for the brutal murder of his former partner's new lover, who he allegedly stalked and beat to death with an object before disposing of his remains. Zachariah Anderson, 42, is charged with killing Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. at his apartment in Wood Creek back in May 2020. He had been dating Mr. Anderson's former girlfriend, Sadie Beecham. The accused killer shares 3 children. They allege Mr. Anderson was jealous of the new relationship and was stalking his love rival. The defense claims the state failed to look into potential suspects, and the 42-year-old is now on trial for the stalking, homicide, and hiding a corpse. He faces life in prison. So what we know about the disappearance is that he was last heard from or seen on May 17th, 2020. 2 days later, it concerned Miss Beecham, and that was his girlfriend at the time, and that is the ex-girlfriend as well of the defendant. She visited his home to check on him after she couldn't get in touch with him. When she arrived at his apartment, she discovered the patio door open, blood on the bathroom furniture and ceiling of the home. An area rug was also missing from the apartment, she told investigators. Miss Beecham contacted the police, who carried out a welfare check inside Gutierrez's home. Inside, investigators found large amounts of blood and signs of a struggle, according to a criminal complaint. The victim's body has never been found, but investigators believe he is dead based on the sheer volume of blood found inside the apartment. So it says the murder on the evening of May 17, 2020. Prosecutors allege that Mr. Anderson went to Gutierrez's apartment and brutally killed him with blunt force because of his he was jealous about the relationship. He then disposed of Gutierrez's body. The morning after, he was spotted on surveillance at a local Walmart where he bought garbage bags, latex gloves, and bleach wipes. And this is actually all on camera. They show that, and this has already been shown in court. So this is something I'd like to show you guys too. I don't know how much I can show tonight or not. But he also bought cans of sardines. Investigator closed in on Mr. Anderson as Miss Beecham revealed that she believed her ex was tracking her movements. On the day Gutierrez's death was discovered, officers found burn pits smoldering at both Mr. Anderson's home and his farm, with the remains of a bleach bottle and the accused killer's clothing among the ashes. Prosecutors said that Gutierrez's DNA was then found inside Mr. Anderson's work van, and that there was evidence that the interior had been scrubbed with bleach. Okay, in this part, the defense has argued this, so that's something that is brought up in opening, and that they definitely are arguing this part about the blood. So you'll hear that, and I would like to play, hopefully I could play the opening of the defense tonight. Parts of the vehicle interior carpet had also been removed. Bizarrely, 2 opened and uneaten cans of sardines were also discovered under the front passenger seat. The arrest was on May 21st, 2020. Mr. Anderson was arrested and charged with 2 felony counts of stalking. That December, he was also hit with charges of homicide and hiding a corpse. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Here it just goes into how he was jealous. He was spying on the couple. He took to his 15-year-old daughter took to the stand to testify and had asked to spy on her mother and record, quote unquote, every single time my mother would get upset. She testified that he would frequently bring up Gutierrez when she saw him. Then, not long before Gutierrez's disappearance, Mr. Anderson also allegedly took his daughter with him to spy on the couple. On the night of April 24th, less than 1 month before the killing, she said that her father driven them both to her mother's home to watch Miss Beecham and Gutierrez through the window. So he and the daughter apparently went and drove there and was watching her mother and his ex through the window with her new boyfriend. Anderson also went through Gutierrez's truck and took photos of the vehicle, license plate, and registration. He then rang the doorbell of the home and fled. The teenager also testified that her father about his plans to follow his love rival, who he referred to as a racial slur. He said something about showing him who the man was, and I didn't quite understand, but you kind of caught on to things that my dad was referring to or who was implying. My dad said to me, I may just watch him or follow him to his house one time just for the fun of it. Those were his exact words to me. And there's been courtroom chaos. A dramatic moment unfolded inside the courtroom March 15th when Mr. Anderson appeared to signal. And that's where I was saying that he was apparently signaling to his daughter to stop talking. But also they've said that the mother used sign language to communicate with her daughter to stop talking. It says that right here. So that's kind of what's been going on in court. Let me play a clip that Shay had sent me real quick, and then I'll go back to it, and hopefully it gets to more of the interesting stuff where they really try to paint him in the light of being a cold-blooded killer, because that's the light that they're painting him, of this crazy cold-blooded killer that is someone that is capable of, and I am not saying, I know this sounds awful, but this is the light that they're painting him of, someone that's capable of just doing horrible things to a corpse. And let me play the video because I don't want to sound too insensitive, but that's the way that they paint him. But let me present, and hopefully you guys are all good in chat and following along, and you maybe know more about the case now. And put a 1 in chat if you can hear.
Not giving up. The mother of a missing Kenosha man is determined to find her son's remains.
Our Aaron Maben has been covering this disappearance and homicide case for more than a year now, and he's live with this new effort, hoping to bring the family some answers. Aaron?
Well, Stephanie and Ted, Rosalio Gutierrez Jr. went missing in May of 2020. A man has been charged for his death and also hiding a corpse, but his body has not been found. Now there is a $10,000 reward, and his family is hoping someone comes forward.
My only hope and my only goal right now is to locate my son. That's it.
Celia Patterson is on a mission to find the body of her only child, Rosalio Gutierrez Jr.
He's always on my mind, always. And sometimes I forget that he's gone.
The father of 2 was last seen in May 2020. When investigators entered his Kenosha apartment, there was a large amount of blood and signs of a struggle.
I put this flyer in my son's apartment building on the door as they exit, because I can't believe that any of his neighbors didn't hear something or didn't see anything.
Zachariah Anderson is charged with homicide and accused of hiding Gutierrez's body. Authorities say Gutierrez was in a relationship with Anderson's ex-girlfriend at the time of his disappearance. DNA results from blood found in Anderson's van came back as a match for Gutierrez. While Anderson denies involvement, investigators have searched properties linked to him, but Gutierrez's body has not turned up.
I'm asking anyone that knows any information about my son's location to please come forward.
Now a reward of up to $10,000 is being offered for information leading to the location of Gutierrez's remains.
I want to bring my son home to Kenosha. I want to know where he's at.
And Celia Patterson believes that there is someone either in the apartment building or a friend who may know something, may have a little nugget of information, may have seen something, and she's hoping that they pass that information along to law enforcement in Kenosha. As for Anderson, he's set to appear in court in the fall. Reporting live, Aaron Maven, Fox 6 News.
Okay, Aaron, thank you for that.
So hopefully that helped a little bit. And now I could get back. Let me see. How's everybody doing in chat? Yes, I agree. It makes him more human, not just a name. I'm so sorry to hear that, Allison. It really is, especially that they've never found his body. And by what they're saying, it doesn't seem like they have any, that they're not looking for the body or that they have any hopes that they'll ever find his body. But here, let me finish playing that.
And no one has heard from him since that 9:27 p.m. time on May 17th through any other method of communication. And so law enforcement focuses on Sadie Beecham. Remember, she called 911. She's still at the scene. She is distraught. She's shaking. She's overcome. And she's really focused. Members of the jury, you'll hear the officer testify. She's really focused on getting her kids safe. She's afraid that the defendant has done this and
Oh, also, so the jury, it's 9 women and 4 men. So I want to know what you guys think about that it's primarily women, because I think being mostly women, especially having children on the stand, that'll kind of tear at their heartstrings. So I kind of think that's not going to play in his favor, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in the chat.
her kids might not be safe because of what she sees. And so she is allowed to prioritize that, and then this investigation, of course, continues. Rosaleo's vehicles are still at the residence. His keys are there. There is a large amount of blood all over his residence in several rooms. The outer hallway,
I agree, Lex.
including outer hallway in a way, suggests that door opening into the hallway was open at a time when significant bleeding happened, including sprayed blood that looks like it's impact type of blood. There's blood then right inside the door, as if someone is now in the apartment and they are continuing to have some sort of intervention or attack happen where their blood is spraying. That blood is all over that now closed door on that interior. It is all over the rug area there and on the walls and on the tables. It extends to the dining room table. It extends to the chairs on the dining room table. Some of it hits the laptop. Some of it is in the kitchen counter. Some of it is pooled blood throughout that area where you are first in the entrance. There is a small stick of processed wood, like a baseball bat or some other hard object. It's not a log. It's not a piece of cut timber. That piece of wood ends up having blood on it, which is found to be the blood of Rosalío Gutiérrez, and hair on it as well, which is also found to be Rosalío Gutiérrez. There is significant blood on the curtains, which are on the entire other end of the apartment from where that entrance to the hallway comes.
Get to the next part, and hi Krioma, and hey Riddler. I thought I saw you earlier, Riddler, but hello. And you're probably not going to find this interesting, Krioma, but it's okay. I'm happy that you're here. So let me get to the next part.
floor area, and there is blood on the fan. There's blood on the ceiling in multiple rooms of this apartment. There is pooled and seeped blood into the carpet in the living room on the floor area, and seeped blood, a significant quantity of seeped blood on the couch that is the primary couch in that living room. And in the middle of the area by the couch, there is a missing area where there's blood surrounding it, but then there's a rectangled off area that has no blood whatsoever. It's pristine, which certainly suggests to anybody who looks at it that an area rug, a medium sort of size area rug, was there when significant bleeding happened and is now missing from that apartment. There are little splinters of wood on the couch that are also there, interspersed in the blood and interspersed in hair that is located, strands of hair located on that couch as well. Law enforcement tests several locations at various places. You'll hear where they tested. Each time they tested and they found that it was blood, each of those times the blood came from one individual, and that was Rosalío Gutiérrez. You will hear that the blood is sprayed, meaning there was impact in multiple locations and multiple different times based on where the blood is located and how the blood presents or looks when law enforcement is present. Remember, present 2 days, about a day and a half after the event. Again, that area rug is completely missing. You'll hear that you might hear some testimony about something called arterial spray, where there's a finer, misty place there too. So some of what you might hear is blunt force trauma, hard objects hitting a bleeding surface.
A moment, I want to answer Kay Breeze.
Are more likely, or at least are possible areas where maybe a knife or something.
There was blood everywhere, Kay Breeze, everywhere except one part where they believe an area rug was, but there was blood everywhere, like the ceiling, the walls. It was just a complete like bloody massacre, basically. But everything that it was just his body was not there. So yes, there was blood.
Some sharp object penetrated someone as opposed to blunt force. Rosalío's own phone records say that he dropped his kids off because he had them that weekend. He dropped them off on the 17th, and then he went home, and he was home by 9:08 p.m. So just within an hour of when he's never seen again. Opened a beer, drank a beer. I think maybe opened a second beer. Was expecting this Miss Macias to arrive. His TV was on, and his phone it goes off at 10:30 p.m. around, and that's found several days later, hidden in his freezer. His phone and his credit cards are behind all the items in his freezer, hidden there. In the cold, the phone goes off. The last time that phone is on in any way, shape, or form is around 10:30 p.m. on the 17th.
So in regards to his phone and his wallet and everything being in the freezer, the defense brings us up too, saying about how the police did such shoddy work that they didn't even find that. So his family is the one that found all that in the freezer. But let me finish playing it.
Rosalío's keys are there. His wallet has ended up on the couch over some areas that already had blood. So it was placed there after the bleeding occurred. As I said, his credit cards were found in the apartment. There's been no evidence that his credit cards or his bank accounts or any other identifying pieces of that type have been used ever in the 1,018 days since. The home, you'll see the pictures, is filled with pictures of his two children, 11 and 8. He didn't miss gymnastic events. He was an enthusiastic baseball coach for his 11-year-old. You will hear electronic media talk about his excitement and planning for his coaching of his 11-year-old that will be starting literally just days, certainly weeks. Baseball season is right around the corner, and watching his son play baseball was one of the true pleasures of his life. 2 days after he is gone, he has in his date book, his planner, that he is going to be at. He didn't miss gymnastic events. He was an enthusiastic baseball coach for his 11-year-old. You will hear electronic media talk about his excitement and planning for his coaching of his 11-year-old that will be starting literally just days, certainly weeks. Baseball season is right around the corner, and watching his son play baseball
I just explained it all to Creoma, and I was talking to you, Shay, and then I see that Jay says, I think you're muted. I'm not frozen though, Creoma. It's paused it. It's paused right now, but yeah, I was muted. How much do you want me to rewind it, Shay? And Creoma, okay, so sorry to everyone who's already heard this, but so he's on trial right now for killing and hiding a corpse of his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend. So they've never found his body, but with the evidence that they have, they believe that he's the one that killed him because he was jealous, and that's kind of what they're going with. And this is the prosecutor's open statement. And then I'm going to play the defenses, and I want to see what you guys think, because like Lex Luthor said, the defense, they are really going strong. After I heard the prosecutor, I did have a feeling about what, like, I thought one thing and then I thought something else after what I heard the defense say. So I don't know. But Shay, how much do you want me to rewind? Just a few minutes about the freezer? Okay, I'll do that. And hopefully you understand by now, Creoma. I'll write a little bit about it in the chat.
'17. And then he went home, and he was home by 9:08 p.m. So just within an hour of when he's never seen again. Opened a beer, drank a beer. I think maybe opened a second beer. Was expecting this Miss Macias to arrive. His TV was on, and his phone it goes off at 10:30 p.m. around, and that's found several days later, hidden in his freezer. His phone and his credit cards are behind all the items in his freezer, hidden there. In the cold, the phone goes off. The last time that phone is on in any way, shape, or form is around 10:30 p.m. on the 17th. Rosalio's keys are there. His wallet has ended up on the couch over some areas that already had blood, so it was placed there after the bleeding occurred. As I said, his credit cards were found in the apartment. There's been no evidence that his credit cards or his bank accounts or any other identifying pieces of that type have been used ever in the 1,018 days since. The home, you'll see the pictures, is filled with pictures of his two children, 11 and 8. He didn't miss gymnastic events. He was an enthusiastic baseball coach for his 11-year-old. You will hear electronic media talk about his excitement and planning for his coaching of his 11-year-old that will be starting literally just days, certainly weeks. Baseball season is right around the corner, and watching his son play baseball was one of the true pleasures of his life. 2 days after he is gone, he has in his date book, his planner, that he is going to be at Camp Timberlea with his children. Some of you may know that local summer camp. That's a 2-day. That's an experience that's supposed to occur on May 19th, just 2 days after this. He never arrives. He never accounts for this with his kids. Obviously, he never coaches baseball. In fact, neither of his kids, who talk to him all the time, who saw him every week, who were in contact with him multiple times a week. You'll hear that his 11-year-old son spoke to him during this time period multiple times per day. And there was never another split second of communication, and has not been for 1,018 days. he has missed their birthdays. He and his mother had a very close relationship, very close. And he has missed all of her important occasions in the last 1,018 days. And the kids he was so devoted for. Never, ever before missed these occasions. Never before, ever out of touch his entire life with the people who cared about him. And not a peep from him since. So I'm back to who the police should go to first. The defendant has actively admitted to Sadie that he is jealous.
Oh my God, Misfit, thank you so much. I just saw Shay's comment. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate that. Whoever got a membership, welcome. And again, Misfit, thank you.
He has admitted to Sadie and then finally to law enforcement that he took his 11-year-old, as I mentioned, to the mom's home. He has a recording of that incident in his phone, brief recording of that in his phone. And so law enforcement certainly focuses on the person who has documented motive and jealousy documented. All of this is interesting because it happens while the defendant, according to a woman, his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, is literally living or staying 4 or 5 nights a week at his girlfriend's home. So what I'm describing to you are things he is doing only when he has his kids over, if he is actually traveling around, or he is doing it despite the fact he continues to have this relationship with, when she's interviewed in May of 2020, she says this relationship has been going on about a year and that he spends 4 to 5 nights a week at her house. But the motive for the defendant is to end this relationship and to do anything he must to stay in control. So the defendant has his kids on this weekend of May 16th and 17th, right? This is the fateful weekend. Sadie picks those kids up in the afternoon. So in the late afternoon, she picks those kids up. And the daughter will tell you, 12 years old, the back of my dad's van, his minivan, which he used to transport us on the afternoon of the 17th, so the same day this happens, was normal. There were no bleach stains and no problems with the carpet in the back of his minivan when she last saw it on the afternoon of the 17th. So now the question is, what is the evidence that the defendant prepared for this attack, this murder? Well, one of the things he did was on May 15th, he took out $50,000 in cash from his account. When law enforcement gets there, he still has more than $46,000 in cash. You're going to see pictures of the bank bag, literally all the money still bound together. So he's got that, and the state will suggest to you that's in case anything goes wrong. He can make that quick run to some location to be out of harm's way or out of apprehension with that much money on hand. You'll hear the daughter indicate that when she left on Sunday afternoon, just hours before Rosalío Gutiérrez is gone, that she saw rope.
Thank you so much, Creoma. I really appreciate that. And you could tell he does not like that prosecutor at all. And I paused it at like a funny moment, but he is like seething. He does not like him. I know I'm not a body language expert, or I don't do analysts or anything like that, but really pay attention to like his facial expressions and like his body language, because you could just tell he does not like him. And again, thank you so much, Creoma.
And duct tape, new rope and new duct tape down in his basement. It was down on top of essentially a wheelie, a desk chair that's down there. When law enforcement gets to this location on the 19th, there is a wheelie chair down there in the basement. The daughter is completely right about that, but no rope, no new rope, and no new duct tape. So the state would suggest to you that is ideal stuff if you think you need to move a person bleeding, dead. You need to seal up a carpet, try to prevent as much bleeding as you possibly can from the body of the person you're removing from his own apartment. During this period of time, there's an extremely heavy rain going on in Kenosha and in the Milwaukee area. Very heavy rain. And so people are not out and about, obviously, in the same way they normally would be. Another way that the defendant prepares is when we go into his multiple phones, we find that the phone he usually uses to contact people, the phone that he usually uses in situations is not being answered, though it is just before and just after, but not being answered from 7:30 p.m. to 11:19 p.m. Left behind the phone that had smart capabilities that would be tracked, left that behind, and so was not able to answer the calls and the texts that come from multiple people, including his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, who tries to contact him multiple times because she is expecting him in those evening hours to come over. She's talking about what they're going to have for dinner. She's talking about what movie they're going to watch. And finally, she basically, sometime before 11:19 p.m., says, okay, I'm going to bed. She's expected him. And he never shows up at her house and never gives her an explanation until after he would have time to drive from his home in Mequon to Kenosha, commit this crime, and get back to the Mequon area, grab up the phone that he hasn't been answering, and now texts her and says, oh, sorry, fell asleep. Fell asleep during the exact hours that Rosalío Gutiérrez is never seen again. And then has a very long conversation with her, like a 42-minute conversation with her from midnight to 12:49, maybe trying to get back in her good graces. Because she's back with him the next night. She comes to his house for one of the very first times she's ever come to his house. She comes to his house that night, the next night, and then the night after that, which is the night he's apprehended. So then I want to talk about the cover-up, because a lot of times the way you can tell that somebody's responsible for something is their cover-up, right? That's a common way of determining somebody did something really bad. So officers get to the defendant in the evening hours. And so it's been 2 full days since Rosalío Gutiérrez is gone, to everyone who knows him. And prior to police getting there, a close couple of buddies of Rosalío Gutiérrez, who have heard Rosalío Gutiérrez say, hey, I've got this new woman I'm seeing. Her name is Sadie. She's got a crazy ex-boyfriend, and maybe even that he broke in my truck one time, right? So when Rosalío Gutiérrez is missing, and the friend group begins to understand this, Michael Campbell is the type of friend who will drive to the person's house where that is suspicious.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me now, and I think I did just mess it up, but I'll try to fix it. To Max Smith, you said, do they know how they killed him? And I had a whole conversation with you, not realizing I was muted. But okay, so they said blunt force trauma, but then they also said like sharp force, and that's something the defense argues also, saying that is it blunt force or is it sharp force? Because blunt force would be like head, like something hard object to the head, or something with their head getting injured, and sharp force would be like a stab wound or something. So they're saying like there's no body, there's been no remains, that you don't even know how he's killed exactly, there's no murder weapon. So those are some of the things that the defense does say, but I don't want to say too much. But so like 2 of the things that they said was that it could be like sharp force, or that it could be blunt trauma. But we do know whatever it was, there was a lot of blood. Hopefully I could get to somewhere close to the right spot that I was in before.
This person he's focused on, who he's been to his house, he's texted a direct quote of what he said, he's done all sorts of other stuff regarding him, he's certainly communicated to Sadie many times about him. This guy's missing. When they go on the 19th and they look inside that minivan, of the defendants. They find that the back is bleached. There's all sorts of bleach stains on the back carpeting. That the seats are out, just the front seats are in, and the back third of the carpeting in that van has literally been cut out. So you're down to where the electronics is exposed. You're down to the plastic flooring under. The carpeting from the minivan is missing, is cut out. Where on the 17th in the afternoon, his daughter said, yeah, it was in there. Nothing was cut out of there. And there was no bleach. Fresh smell of bleach. Carpet cut out in the last 48 hours. You'll hear that in the early morning hours on the 18th, so let's say defendant arrives back in Mequon. By 4:18 a.m., he's searching for area stores by him and when they first open. So he puts in Menards, he puts in Walmart, he's going through all the basic stores. Which of them opens first is essentially his line of inquiry. And he ends up getting a Walmart, opens at 8. This search happened at 4:18 a.m. Okay, this is now about 6 hours after Rosalío Gutiérrez is last known alive. And you will decide what to make of this. The defendant arrives there just after 8, like 8:15, 8:18. It's pouring rain. It's still pouring rain, just as it was the day before. Pouring rain parking lot, not many cars. He parks as far as you can humanly park that minivan from the entrance. And he walks that whole distance in, as opposed to parking in any of the probably hundreds of spots that are closer. He parks as far away as possible. Does he have the body still in the back of that car, wrapped in that rug? He buys, with cash, bleach, rubber gloves, garbage bags, shampoo, Q-tips, pays cash, leaves, and heads over to an area where he is doing home demo and rent. He's doing some demo at a lake house in the Belgium, Wisconsin area. A little more isolated location. It's not his house, in case law enforcement was already looking for him, in case the body had been discovered. This is on the 18th in the morning, okay, just hours after Rosalío Gutiérrez has never been seen. He's at that location, according to his phone, for 3 hours. And then leaves, goes to many other locations, but near that location, so within that immediate area, is a state park, is Lake Michigan, is a number of other remote locations, and hundreds of dumpsters, right? Over the course of any area in Wisconsin, there are hundreds of dumpsters where you might put the remains of Rosalío Gutiérrez. He's got a burn pit at his house that he has smoldering when the cops get there 2 days later. He's been operating the burn pit in the pouring rain. In it are an underwear band from Fruit of the Loom underwear, jean buttons, steel-toed boot components. Did he burn some clothes that he might have been wearing on that day? Officers eventually get into the defendant's laptop. When they get into it, they find a file that's labeled Rosalío Gutiérrez Jr. So it's got his name. This is before law enforcement talks to him. I mean, I'm sorry, they don't know this. They haven't been in.
So on his computer, he had a file of the boyfriend's name. And he also, like they said, he had a burn pit at his house going. He bought all those household items. I think that they already said about how he got the bleach and all of that. And what other things? Oh, so there was a lot of dumpsters and state parks and lakes from the site that he was working at. So those are just some of the things that he said so far. But again, he was supposedly at a work site. He does construction and stuff. But the defense, like I said, really puts a lot of holes in what he says. So let me just finish. Let me play the rest of this.
In his computer when they speak to him. But he's typed in the name, Rosalío Gutiérrez Jr. In that are picture after picture screenshots of Facebook photos of Rosalío Gutiérrez out socializing, but also a number of pictures of him with his kids. And we're going to show those to you to let you think about whether this is obsessive sign of dangerous behavior, to have collected these kind of photos in this folder on your laptop. It's got business info, it's got CCAP entries, it's got an electronic map that's pinned to the actual location of Rosaleo's home. And then in that same file, under that same label, he's got a picture of one of these trackers. Just a photo of the tracker, you know, like a screenshot, right? Auto tracker, voice activated, that spy equipment that he has ordered and paid for just days before. So the defendant, when law enforcement speaks to him on May 19th, knows Rosaleo Gutierrez is missing, knows they want to talk to him about the possible stalking of Rosaleo Gutierrez. That's what they tell him they're talking about. He knows what he has been doing. He knows the facts that we've described happened. There's no way the defendant does not understand how important a moment this is. Here's his chance, if he's an innocent man, right, to talk about exactly what the details are that will exonerate him. Let's clear this up. Here's what the defendant does. When asked what vehicle he drives, he wants to stick with that he drives the Audi vehicle. In actual fact, Christine Remsburg is driving the defendant's Audi around because her car's on the fritz. So he hasn't driven that car around recently much at all. In the Walmart video, for instance, on the 18th, he's driving the minivan. When he drives the kids back and forth on the 17th, he's driving the minivan. He decides to only share that he's driving the Audi. Why not bring up the minivan? Why not tell him right away, hey, the car I'm using is the minivan. Please go search it. Go do whatever you want. Go take a look at my minivan. Absolutely. Instead, he wants to talk about the Audi. Reluctantly indicates that the minivan is vehicle. Oh, but you know, anybody could drive it. That's how he decides to behave, knowing how important this moment is. He acts to these officers, tries to give these officers the impression he doesn't even know this Mexican guy's name. I think they call him Junior, something like that, he wants to say. Well, he's written Rosaleo Gutierrez Jr. in his computer. He's told his daughter the name of Rosaleo Gutierrez. There's a phone message or a phone recording that he records between him and Sadie where he finally admits, okay, I told her the name. And yet with law enforcement on the 19th, he chooses to act as if this is not even a name he knows. He says Olivia gets that from a grandma, when in fact, he admits to Sadie that's not the case. He denies ever being at Rosaleo's home to the officers, where we know based on the electronic evidence, both his text and his own phone, that he's there on May 13th. We know that. But he chooses to deny that he has been there. In fact, says, I don't think I've been to Kenosha. Though his phone is going off a Kenosha tower when he is directly quoting Rosaleo. Then he's asked a very simple question. Again, this is the 19th. Where were you in the evening 2 days earlier? Okay? Not where were you 5 Wednesdays ago. Where were you in the evening 2 days ago? He says, yeah, I was with my girlfriend, Christine Remsburg, spent the night over there. That's where I was. Later goes off that. Later changes that up a little bit. But that's what he wants to go with. When Christine Remsburg, who has been with him the last 2 nights after he didn't show up at her house on the date of this homicide, when she's asked that question, also during this exact same time period, where was he? She also chooses to provide false information about his whereabouts. She says, yeah, he was with me, and that's completely false. She eventually is exposed because her sister says, that's not what happened. And when confronted with that, she says, okay, you're right. He wasn't at my house. So
Okay, I had to unmute myself. I think it's interesting that the girlfriend did lie at first and say that he was with her. So, but yeah, until her sister was like, no, you have to say the truth. But that is interesting that she did lie for him at first.
2 of them have exactly the same false information about where he was. So you are going to finally hear 2 other important pieces of evidence from the state's perspective. One is when the crime lab examines the van in question. These are people who are the experts in the state at at trying to figure out whether there's worthwhile evidence and then trying to do the appropriate testing of evidence having to do with DNA in the state. So the experts come and the van is eventually brought to them, and they go through that van and they identify a particular location that is near the back. So in that same 1/3 of the minivan where the carpet has now been cut out, but it's about halfway up and it's on the plastic panel and it's just a little speck. And when the two DNA and crime scene analysts, when the DNA and crime scene analysts see that, they both say, we think that's blood. But it's so small that they decide that is just going to be our observation. We're not going to use a chemical on it. We're afraid we might not get DNA if we do that. So they observe, they believe it's blood. It is taken to the crime lab. It is tested. And based on the results, again, the analyst, Lisa Treffinger, will tell you she believes it's blood. She believes that based on the process of elimination. It's not semen. It's not skin cells. It's not saliva. It's not a piece of hair. And therefore, based on the content, based on what we
Again, the
get,
defense does
results,
argue this.
It is blood. I believe it to be blood. She will offer that opinion. She'll also tell you that her test tells her that that blood is the DNA of Rosalío Gutiérrez. Rosalío Gutiérrez, there's not going to be any evidence he's ever been in this van, certainly that he's ever bled in this van, that he has anything to do with this van. And his blood, his DNA, is located on that speck amidst the area, not in the same area, but in the van filled with bleach and with the cutout carpet. Cutout carpet is never found, by the way. Clothes that the defendant was wearing on the 17th are never found, by the way. Then finally, you're going to hear evidence of an individual, an inmate named Marquand Washington. Marquand Washington has very serious federal charges that are going on right now, and he's being housed in the Kenosha jail on those federal charges. You'll hear him say that several months ago, he came forward to his attorney and told his attorney that I previously roomed with, I shared a cell, I was a bunkmate with the defendant. That when that occurred, that we bonded over some common sort of criminal activity. So, we talked, and I'm not going to talk about the details, but that they bonded over some discussions of their life prior to this date. You'll hear that Marquand Washington was able to tell details about the case, such as when the police raided the defendant's residence, they found a lot of money and a little bit of weed. And that you'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant described the house that was raided as a crappy house, but in a nice area. You'll hear Marquand Washington say the defendant told him when.
So he just brought up about how they found a little bit of weed. They bring in the daughter to talk about how he grew weed, about his filtration system, his little daughter. I think this isn't the 15, this is like the 11-year-old, about the filtration system and about how he had mushrooms at his house. So, but the judge is like, this isn't even relevant. But that's another part in the case. Let me sorry that I keep pausing it, but I mean, I probably should be pausing it too. But let me press play.
Talking about murder, that murder takes a lot of work, that you have to figure out ways to track people and stalk them, learn their habits, learn what they are up to so that you can find your moment. He suggested trackers from Amazon would be something that would be worthwhile to consider. Marquand Washington says the defendant told him that he wrapped the body up and took it away, that he put the body in trash bags, that he made sure the trash was gone and so it will never be found. Marquand Washington will say, well, how did you lift that guy? How did you lift him, however you got him out of there? And the defendant told him, I was working out at that point. I was so strong, adrenaline. He said, I was like Superman. The combination of adrenaline and my working out was what allowed him to do it solo. Marquand Washington tried to get him to tell him, well, why? Why'd you do this? And he said he never really had a real answer, but that one thing that struck him that the defendant told him was, my ex was getting serious with this guy, and she was happy. The defendant admitted to Marquand Washington. He also had a girlfriend then, though they are no longer together during the period of time that the two of them stayed together. But he provided those details. So you'll hear about the preparation. You'll hear about the act itself. You'll hear from people who love and care about Rosalío Gutiérrez that he is gone. You'll hear about the physical evidence, and you'll hear about the confession made. And when you combine all of those pieces of evidence, then from the state's perspective, you will have enough evidence and will hold the defendant responsible.
So his is ending, and I also wanted to respond to Nora's grandma. She wants to know what this is about. So it's Zachariah Anderson. He's from Wisconsin. He faces trial for charges in connection with the disappearance and the death of Rosalío Gutiérrez Jr. in May of 2020. He's charged with first-degree intentional homicide, hiding a corpse, and stalking. So prosecutors allege Anderson stalked his ex-girlfriend and killed her new love interest, Gutierrez, at his Kenosha apartment. Anderson's back on trial after a judge declared a mistrial last year after only 2 days of testimony, and Gutierrez's body has never been found. So I'm curious what everybody thinks after hearing the prosecution. I don't know if I want to say yet what I think, because I want to play the defense too, and I want to know what you guys, because my opinion kind of changed when I heard what the defense said, but the prosecution definitely did say a lot of damning evidence for sure, like saying about him getting the cleaning supplies, about him with the burn pit, about with they said there was a little blood spot of in the back of the minivan, which the defense does argue, and that comes in the opening statement with the stalking, but stalking doesn't mean murder. That's two different things. So just even though he did do the stalking, that doesn't mean he did murder him. So but that is one thing. I'm trying to think everything else they said, but the prosecution did make a lot of good points. But let me get to the defense's opening, and let me know in chat what you guys think about everything the prosecution said, and if you think that they made a good argument. Like if you're just, even though you haven't heard the defense yet, hearing what the prosecution said, do you think that they have a strong case? Okay, so you could tell she's nervous at first, the defense lawyer, but she gets a hang of it after like 5 minutes. But she is nervous and stumbling over her words, even though I do all the time. But she is on trial, a huge trial. But yeah, let me press play. And press 1 if you can hear her talking.
The essence of this case is actually quite simple. The state just walked you through for quite some time about the evidence and how it thinks it's going to come through during this trial. But at the end of the day, law enforcement nor the state have no idea what happened to Mr. Gutierrez's body. They don't know when exactly anything happened in Mr. Gutierrez's apartment. They have no idea where any alleged remains of Mr. Gutierrez's body is. They have none of that. There are no witnesses that saw my client, Mr. Zachariah Anderson, at 3709 15th Avenue in Kenosha on May 17th, 2020. They have absolutely no witnesses that say, hey, we saw Mr. Anderson and he had bloody clothes or he was acting suspicious. They have none of that because none of that evidence exists. No body, no human remains, no indication of cleaning up a crime scene despite what they state occurred in that van. I'll talk to you a little about that. later. They don't have any of that. Yet they decided to build a script, and the evidence will show you this. They decided to build a script and tell a story and make Mr. Anderson the main character, despite the fact that they didn't have any of this evidence. No body, no human remains, no witnesses, nothing. If you're looking in the wrong places and at the wrong people, you are not going to find the information you're looking for. The state just talked to you at length about some of the evidence that it believes is going to come in, and that evidence is going to show you that Mr. Anderson committed the crimes as charged. And the state and myself, he explained to you kind of what opening statements are. Not going to do that. You're all capable people of understanding why we're speaking to you right now. But I'm speaking because I see the evidence a little bit differently. And when I'm walking you through the evidence that will come in today, it's not based on speculation. It's not based on some theories that are in my head where there's no evidence to back that up. I'm going to walk you through the actual evidence that will come through during this trial. But let's start with what the state kind of walked you through, that this really all stems because Mr. Anderson is a crazy, jealous, obsessive ex. The evidence during this trial will debunk that theory. And in addition to that issue, motive is not an element of the crime. In order to be threatened by a serious relationship has to exist. The state talked about how things were getting heavy between Mr. Gutierrez and Miss Beecham, that they were meeting each other's kids, that there was talk about that. What the state didn't inform you was that Mr. Gutierrez was actively dating and seeing several other women. He was not in any means exclusive with Miss Beecham. He had in fact told some of his closest friends that he was intending on breaking up with Miss Beecham. Miss Beecham had never met a single one of Mr. Gutierrez's friends. And this concept of that the state talked about how, she had never talked to her child about Mr. Gutierrez, or that information must have come from Mr. Anderson. That's not accurate. And the text messages that will come in will establish that Miss Beecham had discussed Mr. Gutierrez with her daughter. There were text messages that she sent to Mr. Gutierrez that says, "Liv wants to meet your kids before she meets you." Well, obviously, she must have had a conversation with her daughter about who Mr. Gutierrez was, but still doesn't change the underlying factor that this was not a serious relationship. Additionally, from February of 2020 through May of 2020, there was consistent communication between Mr. Anderson and Miss Beecham. And that communication wasn't, "Oh, I want you so bad, come back with me." It was kind of a mutual agreement that their relationship was toxic. They were never getting back together, that she had guys she was seeing, and Mr. Anderson had his own girlfriend. The timeline. The state said that the timeline shows Mr. Anderson must have been involved, but the state's ignoring critical evidence as to that timeline. The state admitted May 17th, 2020, Mr. Anderson had his kids, his 3 children. They were at his home in Mequon, Wisconsin. That later in that afternoon, around 5 to 6, Miss Beecham picks them up. Mr. Anderson then, they don't have any evidence that Mr. Anderson left his home. They claim that this is the time where he traveled down to Kenosha, but you'll hear from law enforcement officers that they got surveillance video from multiple places, not only in the Mequon, Ozaukee County area that Mr. Anderson would have had to pass to get to Mr. Gutierrez's apartment, but they also got surveillance from gas stations, schools, the transit authority, from the buses, from neighbors' ring cameras from the area in Kenosha that Mr. Anderson would have had to have passed if he was driving. And you'll hear from law enforcement that they don't observe Mr. Anderson's vehicle. So the state has absolutely, there will be no evidence during this trial that will be presented to you that shows that on May 17th, 2020, when Sadie Beecham is at Mr. Anderson's home, she sees him there. He then texts someone at 11:19 p.m., and you'll hear from law enforcement officers that his phone pings at his home at 11:19 p.m. Nothing shows he ever left home that night. People falling asleep around 7 to 8 p.m. as adults who have children and have been with them all day, that's not unreasonable. So the next morning, he wakes up, he goes to Walmart. You'll hear evidence that Mr. Anderson's a contractor. He was going to a home up in Cedar Grove area that he was working on. He was doing lath removal and other serious removal jobs. It was basically a complete reconstruction of the property. And so if he went to Walmart and parked far away, you'll hear evidence that he likely had tools in his van. And in addition to that, he then goes to his job site for 3 hours. And the state's saying that after that, they don't know where he goes. No idea. The evidence will establish that after he was at the house in Cedar Grove for 3 hours, he went to Menominee Falls to pick up his taxes. That's a nice fact that the state didn't talk about that will come in. And what's interesting about the fact that Mr. Anderson had gone and picked up his taxes in Menominee Falls right after working at his job site in the morning is that that evidence wasn't readily given to the defense. That you'll hear that this evidence, this receipt that stated 5/18/2020 from the tax accountant services was a piece of paper that was located in Mr. Anderson's van. And that law enforcement, when they executed the search on Mr. Anderson's property, they took all the papers and put them in a pile and labeled them miscellaneous papers. And they took one picture of all of those papers and put that into discovery, and that picture's blurry. You'll see that picture. It wasn't until the defense asked to see that documentation that we saw this receipt that proved that Mr. Anderson wasn't for hours getting rid of a body, but was going to pick up his taxes in Menominee Falls. And you'll hear from the accountants that he was there. You'll also hear from them that they had video surveillance, that law enforcement, had they gone and talked to these people, would have been able to get that surveillance video to see what Mr. Anderson was wearing, the fact that he didn't have any blood on his clothes. And then after he picks up his taxes, he goes back home and spends the night with his girlfriend, Christine Remsburg. The next morning, they wake up. It's a normal day. But it's not normal for Mr. Anderson because two random people show up on his property demanding that they speak with a person named Zachariah Anderson. And Mr. Anderson knows that he doesn't know these people. They don't know what he looks like. So he says, hey, I'm his brother. He's not here right now. What do you want? And they say, as the state noted, we're looking for our missing friend from Kenosha. And these people are snooping around his property, acting suspicious. And so what does Mr. Anderson do? He calls 911 himself and says, hey, there's these two random people that are on my property demanding to speak with me. I told them that I'm my brother because I'm a little concerned about why they're here, and they're demanding questions about their missing friend from Kenosha. The man who the state's alleging had something to do with the disappearance of Mr. Gutierrez is calling 911 and saying they're saying that I had something to do with this missing guy from Kenosha. Law enforcement responds to the home, but it's not to respond to Mr. Anderson's concerns. They're there to arrest Mr. Anderson and to execute a search warrant on his property. He's taken into custody. They take pictures of what he's wearing: white t-shirt, blue jeans. They send some of those, they say, oh, there appear to be a stain on the shirt. Let's swab it and send it to the crime lab, not blood. No DNA of Mr. Gutierrez. Oh, the jeans, looks like there's another red dot. Let's swab it and send it to the crime lab. No blood, No DNA linking back to Rosalía Gutierrez. They took pictures, you'll see these, of Mr. Anderson's hands, feet, arms, not a single scratch, not a single bruise, nothing. So the state's assertion that there's going to be evidence that Mr. Anderson had time to get rid of every single possible piece of evidence, the body, all remains, everything that he used to clean up. The state talked about some items bought at Walmart. They were 13-gallon trash bags and 2 things of Clorox wipes. Don't think that's enough to meticulously clean up a crime scene, nor is there any evidence that that is. Additionally, as you'll hear, this was during the height of COVID. It was basically still almost about to be the lockdown, or actually was in the middle of the lockdown. So searching to see what stores are open before you go to a job site was not bizarre. You'll also hear that during COVID, items such as Clorox wipes and gloves were extremely hard to come by, and you would pick them up when you got the opportunity. So the timeline that the state told you, there's evidence that supplements that shows Mr. Anderson could not have had the opportunity to commit the charged offense. The other piece of evidence that the state talked about was Marquand Washington, and that Mr. Anderson allegedly admitted to him that he did this and that he stabbed Mr. Gutierrez, took his body, put it in some trash bags, and took the trash out and got rid of him forever. The state talked to you a little bit about Marquand Washington. Marquand Washington is currently facing a minimum of 10 years to life, and it's a federal case. And you'll hear during this trial that in federal cases, when there are mandatory minimums, the only way to deviate from that mandatory minimum, so the only way to get less than 10 years is if you cooperate. If you provide information and then get on the stand and testify to that and cooperate, that the government, who's the prosecutor in a federal case, can file a document to say, Judge, we're asking for lesser than that 10-year mandatory minimum. And you'll see that in Mr. Washington's plea paperwork, the government nicely outlines that in order for you to get less time, this is what you're going to have to do. Now, the state didn't mention this to you, but Mr. Washington is someone who will literally do anything to get out of his situation. That they had evidence, that the federal government had evidence that he intimidated the witnesses and victims in his own case in an attempt to get out of his situation. And when that didn't work, he was left with one option: cooperation. And in February of 2022, the federal government was told that he had information that he wanted to share. And they wrote a letter to him and they said, Mr. Washington, we've heard that you want to share some information about some crimes that you have knowledge about in the Milwaukee surrounding area. Please let us know what that is. He did not mention Mr. Anderson in February of 2022, and that's critical because the state said that Mr. Anderson trusts Marquand Washington, but Marquand Washington only was housed with Mr. Anderson for approximately 3 weeks. It was a very short housing situation. And those 3 weeks was from December of 2021 to February of 2022. Or no, sorry, I apologize. It was December of 2021 to January 31st of 2022. So in February of 22, he would have had this information, but he didn't share it then. No, he only shared it about 3 weeks ago in a case that's been going on since May of 2020, when he's allegedly had this information for almost 2 years. But what's even more critical is Marquand Washington, as the state says, he will testify, and I'm saying as the state will say he will testify because the defense did not have the opportunity to meet with Mr. Washington. Mr. Gravely, the district attorney, and Vincent Carrera, a detective, they met with Marquand Washington, and they questioned him for an hour and 30 minutes approximately. They did not record the interview. Instead, they gave the defense a 2.5-page
Hold on, let me
summary
pause it
of
to
what he was saying.
explain.
But what I do know from that 2.5-page summary.
Okay, Marquand Washington, he is, someone asked in chat, I think it was Max Smith. Let me look. I'm not sure. I don't see if anyone answered it. So he's someone that I believe was in jail with him, and he wanted to testify against Zachariah and said that he bragged to him about killing and hiding his body and said that he was just like on an adrenaline rush and he was a lot bigger then than he was in the trial, and just like hid about that they would never find the body. But they're saying that he was a snitch basically, and that he would do anything to get a lesser sentence. But let me finish playing this.
Is that he claims that Mr. Anderson said he stabbed the guy. The officer, the state talked about how you'll hear from officers about the blood stain pattern analysis completed in this case. That officer will tell you that he believed that the stain patterns that were seen in Mr. Gutierrez's apartment were consistent with blunt force trauma. That was his opinion just in February of last year, Officer Van Wee. And in his reports from closer to May 2020, he wrote that he believed it was blunt force trauma, so a heavy object or an object hitting someone. And also Detective Carrera wrote in his reports that it was blunt force trauma. There was never a single mention in Van Wee's reports or Detective Carrera's reports that the stain pattern analysis were consistent with sharp force injuries. There's a difference between blunt force injuries and sharp force injuries. Sharp force injuries is a knife. No mention of that. In fact, you'll hear that Mr. Gutierrez was an avid baseball fan, loved baseball. Not only did he love baseball, but he loved to play baseball with his kids. And he was a coach for minor leagues. And so he had baseballs in his apartment and in his truck. He had gloves in his apartment and in his truck. You know,
He apparently wasn't even a cellmate with him that long. So that's something the defense brings up too, that he wouldn't have divulged this to them because it's not like they were cellmates for like a year. They were only cellmates for like not even a full 8 weeks. I think it was 6 weeks or something. So they're saying that that's something that he wouldn't have said to him, but they do bring that up. But yeah, I agree. Why would you tell your cellie all this though?
what wasn't recovered in the crime scene or in a truck? Not a single baseball bat. Not a single one. But the state told you that they had a shard of, the state said it themselves, what could have come off of a baseball bat with blood on it. So the evidence will contradict itself. It can't be the stabbing and it can't be the baseball bat. The next item that the state talked about was the DNA in the van, and the state claims that there will be a witness that will get up here and tell you that that was blood in that van. And I'm not sure where that's coming from. Because Lisa Treffinger, who's an analyst at the state crime lab, was the individual in charge of processing the van and that particular dot. And it was so small, like freckle size. She's the individual responsible. And you'll hear from her and other state crime lab analysts that they processed that van extremely thoroughly. You'll see pictures of the van too. Not a van that's been cleaned. There's dirt everywhere, dust on the dashboard, no indication that it's been cleaned, no blood in the front driver's seat. In fact, no blood anywhere. They saw red dots, tested it for blood. They did a test that's specific to determine if a item that purports to look like blood is blood, negative. They did luminol testing. I don't know if any of you are aware of that, but what they do is they spray this substance and it will basically light up if there's the presence of blood. Didn't light up. They said that there was this one flicker of light, so they tested that area, negative for blood. This dot that the state claims someone's going to tell you was blood, in an email from Lisa Treffinger, the analyst that will testify, you'll hear her tell you that the state asked her, an email from the state, I just wanted to confirm that the sample that was sourced to Rosalio from the van was blood, right? This was analyst Treffinger's response, and she'll testify to this. We could not confirm it was blood. Her own words, not mine. DNA in his van, though. How do you explain that? The state claims that the explanation of how Mr. Gutierrez's blood got in the van was because Mr. Anderson must have killed him. But the evidence will tell you that there's a far more logical explanation for how that occurred. The state talked to you about the evidence that might come in about an incident that happened on April 24th, 2020, where Mr. Anderson had gone into Mr. Gutierrez's vehicle, had taken something out. This was talked about between Ms. Beecham and Mr. Gutierrez at length.
Hi, Jim. Good to see
Ms.
you.
Beecham told Mr. Gutierrez on April 25th about what had happened, how Mr. Anderson had gone in his car. And they talked about how
Max, that's something that they bring up, that he was dating a lot of different women at the time and that he owed a lot of people money. But yes, sounds like Gutierrez slept with a lot of women. There could have been a lot of guys who resented that behavior, especially if he was bedding women who were separated. Yes, I agree. And you're definitely right, spot on with that comment.
how maybe something should be done about that. There was conversations between them about how maybe Mr. Anderson should get a taste of his own medicine. Later that night at 11:10 p.m. on April 25th, 2020, Ms. Beecham received a text from Mr. Gutierrez that said, "What's his fucking address?" Sadie responded, "Well, I guess if he has your info, you should have his." And then Mr. Gutierrez sends her a text with Mr. Anderson's address. This is on the 25th. And then on the 26th, he sends her a text that says, "For the record, only if you say it's okay." He also sent, and then Ms. Beecham sends him a text, "He's gonna find out." This all happens on the 26th of April. Mr. Gutierrez is apprised of the fact that Mr. Anderson went into his vehicle. Sadie and Mr. Gutierrez talk about how something should be done similar to Mr. Anderson. And then on April 26th, 2020, Mr. Gutierrez's Cellbrite location data puts him at 6813 Highland Road, Mequon, Wisconsin. He's there. Mr. Gutierrez, after talking about how something similar should be done to Mr. Anderson, that something similar being going into a vehicle, is at Mr. Anderson's house. His location puts him there. And then right after he's there, he has a video FaceTime with Miss Beecham for 2.5 hours. And that conversation occurs at 3:11 a.m. in the morning. In addition to the fact that there's more reasonable explanations, as you'll see through the evidence, that is ignored by the prosecution, the fact that the timeline illustrates Mr. Anderson could not have done this, the fact that no one puts him there on May 17th, 2020, the fact that there is no blood in the van, there's no body, there are no remains, there's no murder weapon. They still are going with the fact that Mr. Anderson committed this crime. That's because, remember, that's who they chose as their main character. They ignored, and by they I mean law enforcement, ignored legitimate leads and follow-ups, suspicious people. And they ignored that because on May 19th, 2020, when law enforcement met with Sadie outside of Mr. Gutierrez's apartment, she said, "My ex had something to do with it." And they said, "Great, let's run with it. We're going to try to build a case around him, even if we don't have a body. We have no explanation of what happened to him. We have no explanation of where Mr. Anderson would have put a body. We're going to run with him." So what did they ignore? They ignored Miss Beecham. Miss Beecham, as the state noted, went to Mr. Gutierrez's residence at around 11 a.m. on Monday, May 19th, 2020. She had only been dating this guy for a couple months. This guy was dating other people. They only saw each other every other weekend, some weekends. It wasn't a hot and heavy relationship like the state wants it to purport. The evidence isn't going to show that. So she's only been dating this guy for a couple months, a guy she met off of Facebook dating, and decides, you know what, haven't heard from him. I'm going to go to his house in the middle of the day when he would be working to see what's up. Sure, there could be innocent explanations to that, but you'll also hear evidence that Miss Beecham had constantly been texting with her best friend, Rebecca Jekyll, about how she thinks Zach's tracking her, but can't prove anything. She says that. She says that to Rebecca Jekyll, and she's complaining about it. And this is all on 5/14/2020. She's complaining about it, text messages between her and her best friend, Rebecca Jekyll. And on May 14th, 2020, Rebecca Jekyll randomly texts Sadie Beecham and says, in this discussion string where they're discussing how she, is so irritated with Mr. Anderson, Miss Jekyll sends a random out-of-place text that says, phone call has been placed. All I was told is it will begin and you will not know when, where, or how. Call me in 1 week. And what's 1 week later? When she's at Mr. Gutierrez's apartment.
So I do think that was interesting with what Shay said about thinking the ex might be involved, how 1 week later she was at the apartment. So, I mean, there is more. There's another part of the opening and another part with of the defense and the prosecution that I could play. I'm curious what everyone is thinking in chat. And I want to also get Avery, now that you know a little bit about it, I know it's super late for everyone, but I want to know what Shay, you're like, no, I don't want to come up right now. I want to know what Shay thinks. I want to know what you think, Shay. I want to know what Lex, since Lex Luthor's been following it. I don't know if Lex is still here, but I want to know what she thinks. I want to know what a lot of you guys think about it. But when I first heard the defense, I'm like, okay, yeah, he did it. He's like a cold-blooded killer. But I mean, when I heard the prosecution, but then when I heard the defense, I was like, wow, they are really putting a lot of doubt into it. They are really poking holes into the story with everything that they're saying. It really does sound like what they said. They picked a character and they ran with it. And they put so much doubt about like they said, even like the blood, they argued that it wasn't blood, or that they couldn't say whether it was blood or not. They couldn't define that it was. So many things that the defense said, I feel like the defense, even though they were kind of all over the place in the beginning, I do feel that they may have done a better job than the prosecution. And even if he might be like 100, he may really been totally guilty and did this horrible crime and got rid of his body, but they're looking like they are putting doubt. So if I was a juror, I mean, there's so much more testimony that's been put out since then. But I don't know, being a juror with just that so far, I would be thinking like that there is some doubt. I don't know. What are you guys thinking? Feels like the evidence is circumstantial, Jay says. Misfit says, I agree. Kiyoma says, shaky start, but hard to go after Saul Goodman. I agree. As a juror, I would find him not guilty. Jay, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So even like as a juror, I might be like, yeah, I do think he's guilty, but I have to say not guilty because there's reasonable doubt. So yeah, I get what you're saying completely, Jay. Let me see, because there really are, they put a lot of doubt into what the defense is saying. So I'm so curious what he's gonna get. Because like they said, no body, no remains, no murder weapon, no they have no cause of, it doesn't seem like they do have they don't know for sure how he died. So Krioma said, I would find him not guilty too. Wow. So in chat, just with that little information that you have so far, are you thinking that, well, one, how about, let's say, do you think he did it? And then let's say, well, how we think like the jury is going to go. Put a 1 if you think he did it, put a 2 if you don't think he did it, put a 3 if you're unsure. Shay says not guilty. I don't know if you mean not guilty as in you would say not guilty, or if you think not guilty. Okay, Riddler says I am favoring the defense. Krioma says the last 10 minutes of the defense changed my mind. Yeah, the defense, they really did good. Okay, three, need more evidence. 3, wow. So not one. Oh, no, Nora's grandma said 1. Okay, so we do have 1. But in hi, Savvy's aunt or aunt. I don't know how, if you say aunt or aunt. But hello, K-Bray says, I need more evidence. Yes, so I don't see, they did bring in the person that they said did the luminal testing. The defense brings them in, and they said that it wasn't blood. Like, they couldn't say that it was or wasn't blood. So it doesn't seem that it's like I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets not guilty. But I mean, I don't know what happened to, I don't know what happened to his body. I can't imagine being his family, not knowing where his body is. What does Nora's grandma say? I gotta be different, right? It's good to be different, Nora's grandma. If they could say that's creating even more doubt for me. Okay, yeah, the text to his ex. So let me get that. Thank you, Creole. Jay said his poor family, no closure. Okay, so let me grab some other stuff real quick. Yeah, we're definitely gonna do part, even though I don't know if that many people are gonna be interested, but I think it's still good, especially because I'm gonna be covering Sarah Boone just to get some like covering of a trial started. So that'll be good to do. But let me get the text messages stuff. And also I think that like there's more of the opening of the prosecution and the defense. Let me get those 2 things. So you guys chat among yourself while I get that real quick. Hold. My dog is snoring, so hopefully you don't hear that. And I didn't see the text messages things that you're talking about, Krioma. So if you want to message me it, you can, because I can't find what you're talking about. So I'm just going to finish playing the opening part of the defense and then the opening part of the prosecution, and then see what you guys think after this is over.
Really investigate the events the state assert transpired on May 17th, 2020. How they ignored leads, how they didn't follow up on things, how they failed to look in places that should have been looked into. So I'm going to go into some of those investigative failures now. You'll hear that law enforcement really did no searches of Mr. Gutierrez around the immediate vicinity of Wood Creek Apartments, where Mr. Gutierrez lived. That there's a wooded park area that is property of UW Parkside, and that all that they did with that area was send some drones to look around. But you'll hear that it was forested at that point because we're in the middle of May, and that they would not have been able to see the floor of that entire wooded area. So law enforcement looked nowhere close to Mr. Gutierrez's residence in an attempt to find potential evidence. Not only did they fail to do that, they failed to investigate legitimate Crime Stopper leads. So people could call in with tips, anonymous or not, and there was this one tip where an individual called in and said, I saw a woman standing in front of Mr. Gutierrez's sliding door on that concrete slabbed patio on May 18th, 2020. And I remember this because she had asked me what time it was. And I knew it was Mr. Gutierrez's apartment because his sliding door is right next to that exit door. Law enforcement got that information and ignored it. They did not follow up. They also didn't follow up on data that they obtained through a geofence warrant. And you'll hear that a geofence warrant is where law enforcement takes a certain area and asks Google to produce all the information and data on people that they know were in that location on a specific date and during specific time frames. And in this case, Detective Carrera had asked for the geofence data on all individuals who were around Mr. Gutierrez's apartment from May 17th, 2020 at 7 p.m. through May 18th, 2020 at 3 a.m. And that Google produced several hits for people that were in that area. And you'll hear that law enforcement did not attempt to investigate any of those potential people who were in the area at the time the state asserts the crime occurred. You'll also hear that Mr. Anderson did not appear in that data. When law enforcement arrived on scene on May 19th, 2020, there were two dumpsters next to Mr. Gutierrez's apartment, and they had gone and looked at them and noticed that there really was not that much trash. Maybe a bag, a box. And so they called the waste management company and they asked, hey, when was this trash picked up? And the waste management individuals had informed them that the trash had been picked up earlier that morning on the 19th and that it was sent to Zion landfill in Illinois. You'll hear that law enforcement chose not to go to Zion landfill and search what would have been freshly dumped garbage that could have produced evidence in this crime. And you'll hear that that could have been because Mr. Anderson, the person, remember, that they had chose as their main character, there was no indication that he had ever gone out to Zion or that he had spent any significant time in the Kenosha area. Didn't fit their script. They weren't going to investigate it. They also didn't investigate Pheasant Run landfill. That was a landfill that they had potential information that Mr. Gutierrez's body had been dumped there. They didn't go to Pheasant Run landfill. They didn't talk to anyone in management at Pheasant Run landfill to see whether there was any individual who dumped off trash that Monday, May 18th, that morning. They did not investigate that lead. They also didn't investigate people that
Oh my
Mr.
God,
Gutierrez
Misfit.
owed money to. And you'll hear throughout this case that Mr. Gutierrez was in an extremely difficult.
Thank you so much, Misfit. That's so kind of you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are so kind and support the channel and me so much. Thank you. All right, I'm pressing play. I'll rewind it a second because you guys might have missed a little bit. There, I rewind it like 6 seconds.
That lead. They also didn't investigate people that Mr. Gutierrez owed money to. And you'll hear throughout this case that Mr. Gutierrez was in an extremely difficult financial situation. His mom was helping paying bills. He was about to be evicted from his apartment. And he had people messaging him about where their money is and how you don't do this to friends. And you'll hear that law enforcement did not investigate a single person that he seemed to owe a substantial amount of money to. And then they also didn't look into all of the women that Mr. Gutierrez would have been talking to or dating at that time. You'll hear that Mr. Gutierrez had several dating apps. They were located on his phone. He had emails from dating websites, and that law enforcement didn't look into any of the chat strings on there. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. What I just outlined for you is just a little sprinkle of an example of everything that law enforcement failed to investigate. But not only did they fail to investigate legitimate leads and potential other suspects, they also failed to effectively process the scene of the crime. They failed to obtain DNA swabs, fingerprints from areas that, according to their theory, the individual or individuals who was responsible for the disappearance of Mr. Gutierrez would have had to have touched or come in contact with. The first thing law enforcement did when they arrived on scene on May 19th, 2020, was they took a video of them walking into the apartment, of Mr. Gutierrez's apartment, and all of the lights were off. So the state claims that there was this blunt force trauma, this beating, someone was wrapped up in a rug, the crime scene was meticulously
Nora's
cleaned up so
grandma.
that no trace of the other people who were there could be found, that then the scene is staged to the point that it looks like a robbery could have occurred. That obviously didn't happen all in the dark, if they're claiming that this happened around 10 p.m. at night. Yet law enforcement did not swab the light switches in the apartment for potential DNA, nor did they attempt to get any fingerprints. In addition to their failure to obtain swabs from areas that could have contained DNA of the people who are actually responsible for Mr. Gutierrez's disappearance, their lack of precision shows immensely in the fact that 9 days after they initially made contact with Mr. Gutierrez's apartment, Mr. Gutierrez's mother, Ms. Patterson, found Mr. Gutierrez's cell phone in the freezer. That law enforcement's there for 8 days. They'll claim that they searched, they processed, they were very thorough, yet they didn't find Mr. Gutierrez's cell phone that was right there in the freezer, or the contents of his wallet that were in the freezer. So they did swab the cell phone for DNA, but what they didn't swab or process for fingerprints were the cards that were found, which, according to the state's theory, the person who's involved in Mr. Gutierrez's disappearance would have had to touch, to take out of the wallet, to put in the freezer. And they also didn't process the handle of the freezer. It's also critical that there was no blood on the handle of the freezer. And the phone, interesting enough, the DNA, they send the swab that they took to the crime lab, and it comes back and it say, yep, it's Mr. Gutierrez's DNA on the phone, but there was something that's called a trace allele. And you'll hear from the DNA expert that a trace allele means that it's someone else's DNA, that it's a portion of someone's DNA that did not belong to Mr. Gutierrez, but someone else. And you'll hear that that trace DNA that they found on that cell phone, as I just said, did not belong to Mr. Gutierrez. It did not belong to Ms. Patterson, the individual who found the cell phone, and it did not belong to my client, Mr. Zachariah Anderson. So someone else's DNA is on that phone. You'll also see pictures and hear testimony about how the furniture in Mr. Gutierrez's apartment had been moved. And all of this furniture had been meticulously moved. Nothing's knocked over, nothing's broken. The kitchen table's nicely pushed back. The two white tables that were in front of the couch were nicely moved to the side. The couch had been moved, and we can see that because there's indentations in the carpet of where the couch had stayed for a long time versus where it was now. There were no bloody fingerprints or hand marks on the bottom of the couch. They didn't process that for DNA in that area of a couch where the person had allegedly moved it, would have had to have touched. They didn't process the areas of the chairs that would have needed to have been moved, the table that would have needed to have been moved by the person who's allegedly responsible for the disappearance of Mr. Gutierrez. They also didn't process the tools that appeared to be nicely laid out in front of the screen door. Nor did they process in Mr. Gutierrez's bedroom the open window. They didn't process that for fingerprints. What did they do? They processed the blood. That was it. Law enforcement's failure to investigate leads and to effectively process a crime scene is critical in this case. There's no body, no human remains, no murder weapon, no witnesses that can tell you exactly what happened. Yet they wanted to go with the narrative that it must have been Mr. Anderson. And that was someone that they looked into everything possible. They ignored everything else. They ignored the idea that it could be anyone else other than Mr. Anderson. And you'll hear that they meticulously searched Mr. Anderson's property, not just his house, his whole property. No body, no human remains, no evidence that there had been a huge cleanup at a crime scene, no murder weapon. Not only did they search his house, they also searched his family's tree farm, an 80-acre farm, top to bottom, multiple law enforcement agencies, every acre, no body, no human remains, no murder weapon, no evidence of a crime scene cleanup. They also searched Miss Susan Brown Williamson's home, and that was the place that Mr. Anderson had gone in the morning to work, that the state claims is where Mr. Anderson, I guess, chopped up a body and put it in bags. They searched that property meticulously, not only the house, but the entire grounds. No body, no human remains, no murder weapon, nothing of evidentiary value. They then searched all of the bodies of water that were near that home and Mr. Anderson's home, not Lake Michigan, but quarries and little lakes. And they had technology that could go all the way down to the bottom to see if there was anything there. That search also revealed nothing. So the person they chose as their main character, the only person they investigated in this case, they did all of that and it yielded nothing. Mr. Anderson, as he sits in front of you today, is presumed innocent. And he must stay that way. Because the evidence in this case, as it will come in through this trial, will not establish that Mr. Anderson committed the alleged crimes beyond a reasonable doubt. And for that reason, when the defense comes and speaks to you, when the evidence is done, we will ask that you return the only just verdict, and that's a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.
What Jay said, they only investigated one guy. That's insane. Yes. So what she said is they found their character and they went with it. So they had a bunch of other tips of other people, text messages on his phone saying, you owe me money. You don't do this to people. Like, he owed a lot of people money, and they didn't look at those people. They they had their mind set on him, and they didn't look at any other facts, and they just went straight to that, zoned in on that, and they quote unquote had their guy. So I'm not saying he's not their guy, but she really does paint a good picture of him being the scapegoat for this, and that it could have been someone else. So I mean, just the way that she's going about it, I do think that she's doing a good job. And I mean, this could make her career for sure if she gets him off not guilty. What is everyone in chat thinking? I mean, if you were on the jury, do you think, just based on if you heard the opening statements, would you be like, you'd be favoring on the not guilty side, you think? Because I do agree, they definitely did put a lot of doubt in there, and that's what they say. If you have to say not guilty if there is any like reasonable doubt. If they're not guilty, I'm trying to think how it's worded. and I need to have Shay and other people up here so I can discuss it with all of you and we can go back and forth. And I want to hear what Shay thinks about how the ex-girlfriend might be involved. And it's interesting that one of the neighbors says about how there was a woman at the apartment, and this isn't the next day, this is prior to that. And she knows for sure it was that apartment. So that is interesting because she never brought that up, the girlfriend at the time, the one that was dating him, Rosalio. So I mean, that is interesting. There's so many different clips of this case right now. I'm not sure kind of what I should and shouldn't cover. I'll definitely do way more if this is something that you guys are interested in. I mean, it really is. I know I only played a little bit of it, but it actually really is an interesting case. Just like someone, I'm looking at comments today from what people said. One of the comments was, "Today was just bonkers. I loved every minute of it. Shout out to Long Crime for covering the trials." Don't go watch Long Crime now, though, because I want to be covering it unless you want to watch it and then come here for updates. Today was like a train wreck. You couldn't stop watching. That's what they're saying. And they said, "Cannot believe that they're going for murder. Stalking is the only thing that he should be guilty of." Another person put that um, that this is just like the wildest case that they've seen, and that the defense is wiping the prosecution's ass. So it seems like a lot of people are kind of going with what we're saying. Shay says, "Yes, would like to discuss it with me and theorize." Okay, we will do it when it's not 2 a.m. here and 5 a.m. where you are. You are leaning towards the defense, Riddler says. Yes, Avery. So, yeah, I'm surprised. You need to watch it because Avery Shannon, she has a great channel. You should subscribe. I love all of her content and her just the research and everything that she does. I would love to discuss it with you. I know that you'd be I know that you'd be super interested in this case, and just I would like to know what your thoughts are and everything about it. So yeah, Avery, Shay, we need episode 1, 2. We definitely will do that because, like I said, there are so many different things to this, and I'm so curious what he's gonna get. But there's if I'll play one more thing. This is just him in the Walgreens or the next day buying the cleaning supplies. So I'll play that just before we go. I was talking on mute, but it was I'm playing him at a Walmart the next day, buying cleaning supplies, and I was saying to Misfit in a comment like, "Yeah, if you're ever gonna, this is a joke, so no one take it literal, but if you're ever gonna go unalive someone, don't go the next day to Walmart. Yeah, go." I won't say anything else. You can look in the comments above to see what I said to Misfit. But it's yeah, very rookie mistake. But like she said, he was a contractor. He did work on houses, and also it was in the middle of lockdown. So it would make sense to be going to buy bleach and to buy gloves and to buy different stuff because of COVID. So that argument was a good argument as well. So press 1 if you can see it and hear it, please.
Okay, so that's the conclusion of clip 2.
just ask that after a clip's shown that a question be asked about the witness before we just play consistent videos.
So as to clips 2 and 3, are those true and accurate copies of what you saw generated by Saukville Walmart employee and what you then brought back?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to show clip 4, ask you the same questions.
Hi, Christina. And yes, don't forget your sardines before or after unaliving. Oh, have you been keeping up with it? I heard today or the last day in court was like crazy.
Is that true?
Hi, Lynn Diaz.
By Saukville Walmart on May 21st, 2020.
Yes.
Show you the next clip.
Clip 5.
5.
So he said he was a lot bigger at this time, or apparently that's what the jailmate said. So you can see he is bigger in this video. Apparently he was working out a lot before, just
That's
like
the end of clip
with
5.
Chris
And is that a
Watts.
true and accurate copy of what you received from Saukville Walmart 5/21/2020?
Yes, sir.
This is 6. That's the conclusion of clip 6. Is that a true and accurate copy of what you were provided by Saukville 5/21/2020?
Yes.
This is clip 7.
Yes, no man bun yet, Christina.
As to clip 7, same question I've asked on each of the other clips.
Yes.
This is clip 8. That's the end of clip 8, same question.
Yes.
This is clip 9. That's the end of 9, same question.
Yes.
This is now clip 10. That's the end of clip 10. Again, is that true and accurate depiction of what you saw generated on May 21st, 2020?
Yes.
This is clip 11. 11, again, same question.
Yes.
This is finally clip 12, last one. So that's the end of 12. So again, is that true and accurate copy of what you saw produced by the Saukville Walmart employee and also that you brought back to the Kenosha Police Department?
Yes.
So as to Exhibit 1, number 322, do you believe that to be a true and accurate depiction of the information and document, in terms of video document, that you received from Saukville Walmart on May 21st, 2020?
Yes.
Judge, I move admission again, subject to the foundation of the Walmart employee.
Objection. No objection on the conditional admittance.
All right, so what did you guys all think of his purchases at Walmart? And also, there's so much, I'm not sure, we've already been on for over 2.5 hours, but like I want to show what what they found in the burn pit, because he had the 2 burn pits going at the family farm, the tree farm, and then another at the house, I believe. So the detective goes, he talks about what was found in the burn pit and shows different items. Then there's also his ex-girlfriend goes on stand. There's the whole thing, but then there was also a shorter thing that Creoma just sent me that's about the text messages and a recording between the defendant and the ex-girlfriend. But then I also want to show you with that when the child goes on the stand. I do feel bad playing that, showing that, but they did show it in court. So I definitely want to do multiple parts of this. There's one more thing that I think maybe I'll show right now. Let me see. I'm seeing if I should show what police found in the burn pit. Let me see. Should I wait to part two? Because I really want other people to come up too. And Christina, you said that you are from there and this hits home. I'm so sorry to hear that. If you would want to come up at all and talk about anything, you're more than welcome to come up. I know that everyone would love to hear from you. But let me see. So Max said someone is trying to frame Zach. So you guys all have really great theories. I love that. So maybe I don't know if we should just stop it here. I know it's super late. Probably people are going to be waking up while we're ending it. It's going to be 6 a.m. for people soon. But yeah, what time is it for most people? Right now it is 2:15 for me. I know it's 2:15 where Creoma is. I think it's like 5:15 where you are, Shay. What does K-Bray say? Is there any way you could show some of the first trial? I don't think there's any of that out because it was just like 2 days, but I could look, but I don't think like there's anything because it was like nothing of it, but I could look for that for sure. 5:15, 5:15, 3:15, 4:15, 4:15, 5:15. So are you guys awake for the day or have you not gone to bed yet? Especially the 5:15 ones. 2:15. So it's not too bad for you, Dave. Oh, Clumsy. So good to see you, Clumsy Clairvoyance. I'm always late. Good to see everyone. Good to see you. Yes, I have not gone to bed yet, Shay. Hopefully you didn't have too much coffee and you'll still be able to go to bed. Nora's grandma, not gone to bed yet. Awake for the day, Misfit. No, you need some sleep. I hope you got a couple hours before the live. 4:15, but awake, K-Bray says. Sappy's aunt or Savy's aunt. I'm not sure, and I don't know if it's aunt or aunt. You have to let me know. Woke up at 4 to the bathroom, going back to sleep when live is done. Okay, well, I'll end it so you can go back to sleep. But I feel, oh, Clumsy just got here. Oh, you just got done streaming? I'll have to check that out. I knew what you meant. That's what, yeah, live, not live. I knew. You just got home from work? Oh, you're wired? Yes, I'm usually like that from work too. All right. I mean, I'm trying to think if I should just save everything for the next thing. Shay, what do you all think? Should I just wait for the next part? Because like I said, I definitely want to show with the ex-girlfriend. I think it's very important with that. I think it's important to show the child being on the stand. That it's definitely important to show the evidence that they feel that they have against him that was in the van, even though the defense definitely um they say that they argue that evidence for sure. I wanted like the detective that comes up, the people that were first at the scene, different friends that speak. So I do want to show a lot of different stuff. So I'm not sure if I should show any of that right now or the daughter was awesome, Christina said. Yeah, and so did you see where there was supposedly he was telling the daughter like put a hand like with putting his fingers to his mouth to like to shut her mouth kind of like closing her lips kind of, but then they also said that the mom was using sign language to talk to the daughter. Did you hear that, Christina? You heard that too, yeah. I'm trying to think if I want to show anything else, or I think that we're good. I guess that everyone could just go to bed. I think that's enough to show for tonight, but I definitely okay, because when like I said, I posted this literally like 30 minutes before I went live. I didn't give a notification for anyone except to like two people. I won't say who because you're all amazing. But yeah, I didn't tell, like, anyone that I was going I didn't even know if I was going live until, like, a minute before, basically. But and I was going back and forth all day with whether I should do Courtney and Clenny, if I should do I keep wanting to say Natalie Turner. I keep saying the wrong one, but the cosplay model, the OnlyFans, model, or if I wanted to do Shayna Huber, and it's Melissa Turner, by the way, not Natalie. I keep saying the wrong one. I kept going back and forth of which case to do, and also the poll kept changing. So I would do research for one, and then I'd see the poll would go up more on the other, and then I would do more research on another, and then the poll would go up on another, and then I would start doing that one. So I kept going back and forth, and then I didn't know what to do, and then I just decided to do this. Because I did also when I thought I was looking at this case last night, and I was thinking that it was interesting to me because I have had it. I'll go into this more in part two, just like with stalking issues that I've had with exes and that I've had to with an ex, not exes, that I've had to deal with. So that's why this case was of interest to me. Um, but I definitely am going to still cover those cases for sure. I promise I will cover them. There's so much with the interrogation videos alone. Like that could be alive in itself. So all of those are going to be part one, part twos, multiple ones. So that's why I said I'm going to do like the obsession series thing right now, that is when obsession goes deadly or too far. So this is going to be part of it. And yes, hopefully everyone knows what I'm saying. Jay says we get you. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. And I'm happy you found the channel, Christina. You said the DA was coaching as witness. I heard there was a lot of coaching also with the children. So I am so happy that you're here so that I could have someone to like talk to me about the case and everything. So I'm so happy you found this. Put your alerts on so you'll know when to come back. Hopefully this is time when you're off of work because I usually go live really late. So I'm happy you're here. But Misfit, have a good night. Yes, it's a good topic. Or good morning, everyone. Yes. Clumsy Clairvoyance, Lynn, Princess Megan, Elsa, always great to see you. Have a good night. Shay Bonet, thank you so much for being here. Riddler, thank you so much for being here. Yes, I'll have a Dunkin' Donut coffee and an egg omelet, or a donut for sure. Let me see. Savvy's aunt. I'm not sure which one. Thank you for being here. Let me see who else. Edward, thank you for being here. I think I said Jay. I know you made fun of me, but yes, I was happy you're here. Dave, Nora's grandma, I'm always so happy you're here. Krioma, thank you for being here. Thank you for the super chat. Misfit, thank you for the super kind super chat. Oh, and I saw that there was 2 members. Let me see again who it was. I wanted to welcome you guys again. It was Allison Faye and Riddler. Thank you so much for joining. And K-Braze, I know you're here. Avery. Okay, I think I said bye to everyone. If I didn't, thank you so much for being here. And let me know if this is something that you do want me to keep following, or just kind of give little updates like in the in just on the community tab on my YouTube, or not. Because I am going to be definitely doing the Sarah Boone suitcase killer case, but I know a lot of people are doing that, and I didn't see that anybody was covering this case, and that's why I thought that it was an interesting case and no one was covering it, so that's why I wanted to do it. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and everything, and I hope everybody has a good night and a happy Sunday. Bye.